two nations with no shared border, no direct colonial history with one another, yet entangled in a conflict reshaping the Middle East for nearly a century. To understand what is happening between Iran and Israel today, you cannot start with the missiles. You have to start with the maps, the broken promises, and the geopolitical architecture built when both states barely existed. After World War I, the Ottoman Empire collapsed. Britain and France divided the region based on their own strategic interests, largely ignoring the ethnic, religious, and cultural realities on the ground. Palestine came under British administration. In 1917, Britain issued the Balfour Declaration signaling support for a Jewish national home in Palestine. At the same time, Britain had made separate promises to Arab leaders suggesting independence in exchange for their support against the Ottomans. Two conflicting commitments, one piece of land. After World War II, the United Nations proposed a partition plan for Palestine in 1947. Iran voted against it, not out of hostility toward Jewish people, but out of concern that the division would generate a permanent cycle of conflict. Israel declared statehood in May of 1948. Multiple Arab states responded militarily the following day. Israel survived and expanded its territory. For Palestinians, approximately 700,000 people were displaced in what became known as the Nakba, meaning the catastrophe. What most people overlook is that in the years immediately following 1948, Iran and Israel were operating as quiet strategic partners. So under Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, Iran became the second Muslim-majority country to recognize Israel. Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion developed the periphery doctrine, building relationships with non-Arab states on the edges of the Arab world. Iran supplied oil to Israel, and both countries cooperated on intelligence and regional security. The relationship was built on mutual interest, not ideology. That arrangement began to fracture in 1953. Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh had moved to nationalize Iran's oil industry. The United States Central Intelligence Agency and British intelligence coordinated a coup that removed him. American energy companies acquired a significant stake in Iranian oil production. The Shah, reinstated and dependent on external backing, ruled with increasing authoritarianism. His intelligence agency, SAVAK, and the National Intelligence and Security Organization, received training from the Central Intelligence Agency and Israeli intelligence, and became closely associated with political repression. Israel was no longer viewed inside Iran as a regional partner. It was viewed as part of the network backing the government suppressing Iranian political life. In 1979, the Islamic Revolution removed the Shah. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini came to power and reoriented foreign policy entirely. The United States was labeled the primary adversary. Israel was framed as an extension of that adversary's presence in the region. The strategic partnership between Iran and Israel was over. Iran's strategic thinking shifted fundamentally during the Iran-Iraq War, which lasted 8 years beginning in 1980. Iraq received financial support from Gulf states and backing from both the United States and the Soviet Union. For Iranian leadership, the war reinforced one principle: direct conflict must never again take place on Iranian soil. The long-term response was investment in what became known as the Axis of Resistance. Allied forces in Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Gaza positioned to create strategic distance from Iran's borders and generate ongoing pressure on adversaries without direct engagement from Tehran. Through the 2000s, the central tension shifted to the nuclear question. Iran expanded its uranium enrichment program. For Israeli leadership, the prospect of Iran achieving nuclear capability represented an existential level concern. Iran framed its program as a deterrent. The two sides entered what analysts describe as a shadow conflict. Iranian scientists involved in nuclear work died in circumstances suggesting targeted operations. In 2010, sophisticated malware known as Stuxnet damaged centrifuges at Iran's Natanz nuclear facility, broadly attributed to the United States and Israel. Israel also conducted hundreds of airstrikes in Syrian airspace, targeting Iranian weapons shipments intended for Hezbollah in Lebanon. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action signed in 2015 was a diplomatic framework designed to constrain Iran's enrichment activities in exchange for sanctions relief. International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors confirmed Iran was complying. In 2018, the United States withdrew from the agreement. Iran subsequently increased its enrichment levels. By 2025 and into 2026, the International Atomic Energy Agency estimated Iran had accumulated approximately 440 kilograms of uranium enriched to near weapons-grade levels. At 60% enrichment, the remaining technical distance to weapons-grade material is substantially shorter than the distance already covered. The October 2023 Hamas attack on Israel, which resulted in approximately 1,200 deaths and over 250 people taken hostage, brought every dimension of this conflict into acute focus. Hamas had built its military capabilities over years with Iranian financial, technical, and training support. Whether Iranian leadership specifically authorized the timing remains an open question. Israel's response in Gaza, combined with the activation of fronts from Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen, reflected how deeply Iran's regional network had been integrated across multiple theaters. In April 2024, an Israeli airstrike on an Iranian consulate in Damascus killed senior Iranian military officials. Iran responded with a direct strike from its own territory. Over 300 drones and ballistic missiles launched toward Israel. The overwhelming majority were intercepted. The strategic significance was clear regardless. Both governments were now publicly acknowledging direct exchanges that had previously existed in the space of deniability. By late 2024, the Syrian government had collapsed, severing the corridor Iran had used for years to move weapons through Syria into Lebanon. Iran's regional network absorbed significant losses within roughly 14 months. In compressing years of strategic positioning into a short period of operational setbacks, the economic dimensions of this conflict reach far beyond the region. The Strait of Hormuz, through which approximately 20% of global liquid fuel consumption moves daily, is a critical pressure point. The most exposed economies are in Asia, China, India, Japan, and South Korea, collectively account for the majority of oil passing through that corridor. Volatility in energy markets, increases in shipping insurance, and freight rate disruption carry downstream effects on consumer prices in countries with no direct stake in the military situation. What this conflict reflects at its core is not a bilateral dispute. It is the accumulated result of colonial-era border decisions, Cold War interventions, a revolutionary ideological shift, and nuclear deterrence calculations, and decades of proxy competition, all concentrated in a geography that sits atop a large share of the world's energy infrastructure. The financial consequences of instability here do not stay in the region. They move through supply chains, energy prices, and global markets in ways that affect people far removed from where the events are taking place. The history behind today's headlines did not begin with the most recent escalation. It began with a map drawn by two colonial powers in 1916, and the consequences of that map continue to shape global economic conditions more than a century later. If this analysis helped you understand the structural forces behind the news, subscribe to Capital Anatomy and share this with someone who wants to look beyond the surface of the headlines. Every like helps this kind of content reach more people. See you in the next analysis.